Good morning, students. Welcome to the subject of BPS, that is Business Policy and Strategy. We are dealing here with unit number 3. We are to start with unit number 3, that is all about environmental analysis and diagnosis. Now, when this stage is required, see BPS, when we are learning BPS, that is Business Policy and Strategy, it is more or less learning about the strategic management. If you want to take, or if a business wishes to take the strategic management, then it needs to study the SWOT, or it needs to do the SWOT. That means it needs to find out the strength, weakness, and it needs to find out the opportunities and threats on the other side, right? When we say that it wants to find out the strength and weakness and opportunities and threats, that means it has to study with or it has to take up with the study of the environment in a proper condition. What happens here is that it studies its environment with the study of internal environment on one side, right, and study of external environment on the other side. Now, before going ahead with this particular point, let me just clear it out that strategic management means framing specific strategies. Why it wants to, why any business wishes to take up with strategic management? Because with the help of different strategies, it tries to find out the opportunities, it tries to have the long survival, it tries to either excel in the market, and it tries to behave in a most competitive manner then as compared to the competitors. Means it's a kind of war situation, and it tries, with the help of the weapon of strategic management, it tries to fight the situation in its best. That is why the strategic management is taken up by any business. When it takes up strategic management, any strategies or these specific plans are not framed or not created in vacuum. It undergoes a lot of studies, it undergoes a lot of say analysis, and then it comes up with the different strategies. Now, when any company, that is why wishes to take up with strategic management, what it generally does is it takes up with different analysis tools, and SWOT is the most simple and most known kind of the setup that it takes up. That is, it studies the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. But these four things are concerned, or the study of, or when we try to deduce, when we try to find out the strength and weakness, then we need to study the environment. Which environment is concerned there with the business? See, any environment or any business will not run in vacuum. It has to have the business environment in which it survives, right? So when we talk about the word environment here, we are trying to take two types of different environment. One is internal environment, the other one is external environment. And when we try to study in deep the different factors related to this internal environment and external environment, in short, it is said to be environmental analysis, on which the whole chapter that we are studying right now is dependent, or it is the study of these two factors that is the unit number 3 all about, right? As you can see it, if a company wishes to take strategic management, it includes SWOT. When it includes SWOT, what it is the analysis or deep study of environment. When we are talking about environment, it is two types of environment: internal environment on one side and external environment on the other. And when we study it, it becomes more or less the environmental analysis. Now, as you can see it in the next say diagram here, that a business is connected with two arrows, right? Internal environment, which gives us the strength and weakness. On the other hand, external environment provides us with the opportunities and threats. And strategies are framed by the business using this strength and weakness and opportunities and threats that you have studied for the long-term survival of the business, right? So that is what is known as environmental analysis. As you can see it, let us study the introduction, or maybe it's a kind of a formal introduction to the environment, and then we study the external and internal environment in detail further. In the simple words, environment can be defined as the totality of all the factors which may be internal or external and beyond the capacity of the business undertakings most of the time, right? In simple words, if we say what is environment, then it is all the sum total of the factors that is existing internally and externally. Any business is a system and thus it operates in context with different factors called environment, right? It is a system, it cannot be in vacuum, it is a system and connected to different factors. It may be different factors which may be existing environment in the internal environment or maybe in the external environment. This environment is what? It is all the conditions, circumstances that influences and affects an organization and its performance. These conditions, these circumstances are such which influences, which keeps a kind of impact or which brings a kind of impact on the organization and maybe its performance also. So though the influence of this environment may be direct or indirect, it has to be studied and it has to be faced, right? So there at times there may be a direct influence, at times it may be indirect, but anyhow this has to be faced by the business. Thus any business cannot work in vacuum, as it is a part of social system and it continuously exchanges the information, the resources and power with the environment, right? Continuously it keeps on exchanging the information, it keeps on exchanging the resources against the money, it exchanges the power, it uses the power of the society, and likewise it tries to survive. So the environment plays very important role. So B covers the wide area with which the business gets affected positively or negatively. Thus business environment is study of such kind of environment which is wide in nature and a business highly gets affected positively or negatively because of it. Again, the business gets all the necessary resources from the environment and achieves the result after interacting with it. So what happens is a business interacts with the environment, right? And after getting into the interaction, it achieves the results. It may be positive or negative, but to achieve the maximum positive result, a positive environmental analysis is a must. Thus in environmental analysis, EA means environmental analysis here, provides on one hand what? The knowledge of the threats and opportunities that exist in the external environment and the weakness and the strength of the business on the other hand. Thus we can define business environment as the sum total of all those factors, external factors, which affect the organization's operations and performance on overall basis. Thus, the success of any business largely depends on the environment in which it operates. Thus, every business firm is considered as the social citizen and various stakeholders are associated with it. That means, if a business is undertaken, then various stakeholders, various interest groups are interconnected. It may be inter-stakeholders. Internal stakeholders means all those who are within the organization, within the business. They may be the promoters, the executives, employees, staff. They are considered to be the internal stakeholders. External stakeholders are all those people like suppliers, banks, financial institutes, customers, clients, regulatory authorities, and very much society at a large. They are all considered to be the stakeholders of the company or business. And what a business does, it tries to see that neither the internal stakeholders are being say exploited or cheated, they are getting their interest, and the external stakeholders are also getting the interest as against whatever the contribution they have done for the business. Now, what happens is the stakeholders of various interest groups are many and at times conflicting rather than complementary. It has been observed that આ બધા જ સ્ટેકહોલ્ડર્સના જે ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ છે એ એકબીજાથી contradictory હોય, right? They are conflicting rather than complementing each other. Now, it is this business who has to take up such a kind of decision in the form of strategies with which it can create such a kind of strategies which are complementing the interest of all the stakeholders, or else we can say that they are giving all the types of positive interest to the stakeholders and reducing the negative impact. Now there is an example that has been provided here. For example, see how the strategies are being framed, and before framing the strategies, how these two contradictory situations are to be considered. For example, exploitation of labor may be the loss of employees and gain to the owners, right? If employees are working for more hours, it may be providing productivity to the employers, employer or maybe the owner, but on the employee's hand it is a loss, right? Again, the poor quality, the next situation is the poor quality of the product or high prices are disadvantages to whom? Customers, but it is a kind of profitability or gain to the owners. Both these situations are contradictory to three parties. Owners, they are getting their benefit by making the people work for more hours maybe or exploiting them. On the other hand, by giving the product of a poor quality, they are trying to reduce the cost, and by creating the high price for the customer, they are trying to create the profitability. હવે આ બધી જ સિચ્યુએશન એવી છે જેની અંદર ઓનર્સ આર ગેટિંગ ધ બેનિફિટ, બટ ધ કાઉન્ટર પાર્ટ, દેટ મીન્સ એમ્પ્લોઈઝ ઓન ધી અધર હેન્ડ, customers on the other hand are not being satisfied. So what happens now? What is to be done? So with the help of strategic management, what a business tries to do is it tries to convert the competitive interest into complementary interest. That means ત્રણેયના ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ સચવાઈ રહે એવી સિચ્યુએશન, એવી સ્ટ્રેટેજીસ બનાવી કે જેનાથી ન ઓનર્સને નુકસાન થાય, ન કસ્ટમર્સને નુકસાન થાય, ન તો એમ્પ્લોઈઝ આર ધ સફરર્સ, રાઈટ? સો SM is generally taken up, that means strategic management is generally taken up to create a kind of win-win situation, like increasing the productivity and contributory rewards to the employees. How it can be done? By framing such strategies with which the productivity is also increased and the contributory rewards is also given to the employees. So none of the parties are at the loss, or they are at the minimum negative impact, right? While developing linkages between the suppliers and customers for cost reduction and the quality improvement on the other side, right? So this is to be created with the help of strategic management. Such strategic decisions presupposes the scanning of external as well as internal environment, and that is why to create this strategic management, આ strategic management કરવા માટે જ strategies બનાવવી પડે, અને strategies એવી હોવી જોઈએ which creates the win-win situation for all the stakeholders. And for creating these strategies, what is to be done? Before creating the strategies, rather આપણે environmentને study કરવું પડે, environmental analysis કરવું પડે, અને then the decisions related to the external and internal environment is taken up in the form of strategies. This is what is known as the environment and how it is related to strategic management and the environmental analysis on the other hand, right? Now we'll just quickly study the characteristics of the environment and then we proceed further. What is environment? We know it is made up of internal and external environment or factors or determinants, right? Internal environment is considered to be generally made up of those factors which are controllable as against the external environment. So when we try to study the characteristic of environment, it includes mostly both the types of environment. Like it is a complex phenomenon. The first characteristic is it is a complex phenomenon because there are number of factors, there are number of events, there are number of conditions and influences that are to be considered, and that is why it is a complex phenomenon. The next characteristic is business and environment are interdependent. None of the business can survive by itself, nor the environment exists without businesses. That means they are interdependent in nature. Environment forces, the third one is the environment forces cannot be neglected by any business. Very very important is this characteristic, that environmental forces lying in the environment, જે પણ factors, જે પણ determinants environment ની અંદર છે, they cannot be neglected by the business, and that is why they are to be studied properly, right? Next is environment is multifaceted and thus difficult to study and evaluate. So many factors are there, multiple factors are there, and they are having the counter effects. So it is complex also, it is difficult to study also, and at times it is even difficult to evaluate. But even though you have to study it, and that is what is environmental analysis all about. So most of the external factors are complex and uncontrollable, we have seen earlier also, and thus it calls for the careful study by the business manager to avoid the negative results or maybe the consequences. Because the external factors are complex, they are controllable, their careful study is required by the business manager so as to avoid the negative consequences, right? Consequences means result. It does explains the scope of activity of the firm in which it operates. That means the next characteristic is it gives the area of activity to the firm, that these many things are to be done. It may be external or internal, as I said earlier also. The next characteristic is external environment provides opportunities and threats, while internal provides or reflects the strength and weakness of the company. Each institute has to fulfill the extra environmental needs and expectation. Those who fail to fulfill it may lose their existence sooner or later. Very, very important is this characteristic, that every institute, every business has to fulfill environmental needs somewhere or the other, right? At somewhere or the other point of time, and the expectations are to be fulfilled. If that is not done, what will happen ultimately is it will be a question for the existence of the company. That means sooner or later the company may die or may be out of competition or out of the market itself. To avoid that situation, the need of the environment should be fulfilled after studying it. A business needs to keep a complete knowledge, and that is why a complete knowledge set of knowledge is to be kept, and close relationship with the environment is to be maintained. Thus, while designing the corporate strategies, a firm needs to study and analyze external as well as the internal environment, right? So before stating, or maybe before framing the corporate strategies, what is to be done? These two environment are to be studied. An environment of business is dynamic in nature. The 12th is it is dynamic, ever changing. You cannot have the static environment as far as the external environment is concerned, right? It is dynamic in nature, it keeps on changing all the time. This is what we have done are the characteristics of environment, right? Next comes up the third important point that we are going to study today. It is all about environmental analysis. What is analysis? Analysis is nothing but the deep study of anything, right? When we are dividing into different elements and we try to study the elements in detail, it is said to be analysis. Here, when we are talking about environmental analysis, let us try to study it and try to find out what it is all about. It is environmental analysis is the process of identifying all the external and internal elements that can affect the performance of the organization and evaluating the level of threats and opportunity that are present. What is environmental analysis? It is a process of what? Process of identifying. That means finding out what? External as well as internal elements that can affect the performance. Why these factors are to be considered? Because somewhere or the other it affects the performance of the business, right? With the study of these factors, what can we find out? We can find out the threat and opportunities available for us in the external environment, and with often the threats and opportunities after their assessment are incorporated in decision making process, as so as to have the better alignment of the strategies with the organizational strength and weakness. We do 4 things at a time in the environmental analysis. Remember, like this: we study the internal environment to find out the strength and weakness of the company, right? And on the other hand, we study the external environment to find out the threats and the opportunities, as we have seen earlier in the chart also. So with that, what are we trying to do, or what the business is trying to do with this 2 or 4 things? It is trying to find out or trying to make such kind of decisions which are then termed up to be the strategies, and then it helps to have the greatest performance of the business in the market. Thus, environmental analysis is described as, mind my words, as the process which examines all the components, internal as well as external, that has influence on the performance of the organization. Where the internal component indicate the strength and weakness of the business, the external provides with the opportunities and threats that are lying outside the business. To perform internal environment or maybe analysis, the constant information from external and internal sources is collected, evaluated, and further the strategies are framed. The 2 points that we have studied right now are very, very crucial to understand the meaning of environmental analysis. What it is? It is the constant process of finding the information or getting the information from where? From the internal business, internal environment, internal sources within the business and external sources outside the business. What do? We collect the information, we try to evaluate, right? We try to assess, we try to examine them, and after doing that we frame the strategies dependent on that, and that is said to be the environmental analysis. Thus it is the primary study and the analysis of micro, macro and internal factors which then reveals the strategy planners as to how to frame the strategies towards the attainment of the goals. That means પછી તરત જ environmental analysis કર્યા પછી the planners get to know that what type of strategies can be framed so as to have the maximum type of performance or maximum results, right? So before staging or before taking up with the strategy framework, before taking up with the formulation of strategy, what is to be done? A proper study of environment has to be done. એની અંદર આપણે શું કરીએ છીએ તો કે દરેક ફેક્ટર્સ, ઇન્ટરનલ્સ અને એક્સટર્નલ દરેક ફેક્ટરને આપણે એક્ઝામિન કરીએ છીએ. એના દરેકના ઇન્ટરનલ્સમાંથી આપણે SWOT, that means we try to find out the strength and weakness, externalમાંથી we try to find out the opportunities and threats, and then ultimately we try to frame such strategies which are most beneficial to the organization for its excellence in the business, right? Here, if we have understood what is environmental analysis, we'll go with the features. What are the features of environmental analysis? It is a continuous process. What type of process? Of providing necessary knowledge of environmental changes, right? What is the first characteristic? First feature, it is the continuous process. What type of process? What do we do there? We try to provide necessary knowledge of environmental changes. Whatever environmental changes are taken up or are happening, those changes are noted and then the decisions related to them are made. So an alert business manager continuously keeps a track on the rapid development in the environment. So what a manager does, a business manager continuously keeps a kind of track or keeps a kind of control on whatever the changes are happening in the environment. It is a holistic. Second feature is it is a holistic. That means considering every aspect as a whole, tries to exercise. That means it is a holistic exercise that comprises of total view of environmental factors rather than viewing in fragment. That means એક factor ને individually જોવા કરતા environmental analysis એવો process છે which is a holistic exercise which comprises the total view. આપણે બધા જ fragment ને પીસીસમાં નહીં બટ એઝ અ હોલ આખું ઇવેલ્યુએશન થાય છે, આખી ઇન્ફોર્મેશન કલેક્ટ થાય છે, સ્ટડી થાય છે, એન્ડ દેન ધ ડિસિઝન્સ આર ફર્ધર ટેકન અપ. It provides a kind of early warning or signals regarding the whole circumstances of the environment. With the help of environmental analysis, what we can find out, we can get the warnings, we can get the signals whether they are positive or negative about whatever the circumstances may happen in the future, and beforehand we can get those signals. Accordingly we can plan out our strategies. It is a systematic process, right, providing a kind of knowledge of opportunities and threats emerging in the environment. So it is a process which is say phenomenal, it is systematic, it is very meticulous, through which we are trying to get the knowledge of opportunities and threats which are emerging in the environment. And thus it is exploratory process as it is concerned with the present as well as future, right? You are trying to connect the future events with the present situation, and we are trying to make the strategies through which we can have the long term survival, and it is the basis of strategic management process. And that is why I took up with two diagrams before, right, that if you want to take up with strategic management process, environmental analysis is very important base for the same, right? So today what we have done is we have created the base. If we want to take up with strategic management, or if any business want to take up with strategic management, it has to have the SWOT done. That means analysis done. Analysis is what? It's nothing but the deep study of all the factors lying in the internal environment which are within the business and more or less controllable, and the external environment, all those factors which are outside the business and they are uncontrollable in nature. પણ આ બંને વસ્તુઓ સ્ટડી કરવી પડે એટલા માટે, because only then the company or the industry or maybe the business will come to know its strength and weakness with the help of internal study and opportunities and threats lying in the external environment with again with the deep study, and that process is considered to be environmental analysis. Thus a business is affected with the strength and weakness and the opportunities and threats, and then after studying this, what is being done, the strategies are framed for the long term survival. Thus we can say that when we study these environment, it is said to be the process of environmental analysis, and then we can have the strategies being framed, right? That's the end of today's lecture. When we meet next, we shall be taking up with the other aspects of environmental analysis. For now, it's a goodbye. Take care of yourselves. Thank you.